Hi everyone, I just want to show you today a piece that I've been doing for some pieces that I've been doing for my sister-in-law for her beauty salon to hang on the wall. So they're really cool quotes. But I thought actually rather than just showing you me doing them, I'd rather talk over laying everything out. So the reason for this is because I did this one first of all, and actually when I got down the bottom I thought it's just not laid out correctly, so I wanted to talk through where you start when you've got a quote, particularly a long one, how you space everything out better than this. This is a draft that's going away. So the stubble on your legs looks so good, said no one ever. That's the quote I need to work with. So what I would usually do if I wasn't rushing as I was when I did that one is write everything out completely central. First of all, very roughly with a pencil. Now I'm going to do this harder than I usually would so you can see what I'm doing, but you can do it very lightly on your final piece and then rub it out. But I would suggest, if you can, a piece of copy paper, sketch it out on there, cut it down to the size, whatever you're going to be using. So I am on A4, and then transfer that onto your final piece afterwards. So the stubble on your legs looks so good, said no one ever. So I think actually I'm going to change it so the word so good is bigger and highlighted in silver, and then said no one and then ever highlighted as well. So what I'm going to do is say, well, so good, I'd imagine it is sort of more than halfway through. So good is probably going to be highlighted around about there. And then to balance that down here, the last word ever, I think I'm going to have here, down here. Actually, I better do that a bit darker so you can really see. There and there. That's going to be my highlighted words. Now the rest, the stubble on your legs looks, so I can have the word looks here. So you can see, I mean, this is a sketch, you can see how I'll need to tweak that a little bit. And then so good will be brush lettering, so that will go like so. So just in pencil letter that so you can roughly sketch where it is. So the stubble on your legs. So there's 5 letters there. So what I'm going to do is split that almost in half roughly. Stubble is long words, so the stubble on your legs, so over 2 lines. So just very roughly, if you think about the word the stubble, let me bring this in. If you look at the number of letters, so the center point is going to be around about here. Now I usually say at least 1 letter for every space, so 1 2 3 4 5, 1 2 3 4 5, making the T the center there. Okay, just coincidence that it's perfectly symmetrical long letter. So if I pop a T in here and just sketch that out roughly, and then the word the. Now what I do here is I leave my gap and I work backwards. The stubble. Okay, you can space that out a bit more on your final piece. The same with on your legs, so between the U and the R I would say, so 1 2 3 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4 5 6. Yeah, so the gap between the U and the R is going to be central, so we're going to do U R gap legs. And again, I'm really not doing this very neat at all, it is just my sketchy writing. The stubble on your legs looks so good, said no one. So this is all going to be one word, so if I bring this back in, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11, so that would mean the 6th letter or space is going to be, the 6th character is going to be my middle. 1 2 3 4 5 6, also no, N in no. So there we go. Now I've got a bit of a gap here, okay, it's not flowing. So I'm just thinking what I'm going to do about this gap here. If I've got a gap here as well, what I don't really want is a gap up here. So what I may do is bring, if I get a pair of scissors, because what I can now do is trim this up. This is all the process that I go through when it comes to spacing for a piece. Okay, so these are scrap pieces, take those away. And then I'm going to cut between those and the same here. Okay, so I'm going to bring in my final piece. So the stubble on your legs looks, and then what I might do is have so good, said no one ever. Right, let me just write the word ever in here, just so I know what that is. There, okay. Looks, I like to slim these down a bit so they don't overlap too much. Looks so good, said no one ever. Okay, now with this, because I've got, that's perfectly centered. With this, it's a little bit to the sides. So what I'm going to do is trim this down and have that to one side and then this one to another, and I can play with which side. There we go. So the stubble on your legs looks so good, said no one ever. What I'll do then, when I finish, I'll get some ink splats, as you can see around here, the ink splats, so I can kind of fill in any spaces with those as well. Okay, so now I'm happy enough with that. What I can do is just place these to the side a little bit, then have a go at retracing that on here. Similar sort of concept. I can't remember how I did that there, about that. Similar sort of concept now, but I've got a rough idea. So I'm starting with the stubble here. Now I'm actually going to do the letters. As I will be drawing over them. So this is a bit of a font that is kind of, it's all capitals, it's quite straight, lots of straight lines. Some letters go up higher, some come down lower, and when I do them with the pen, which is a special pen, I won't be sticking to uniform thin lines up, thick lines down. I'll explain that while I do them though. So with the word legs, I'm actually going to start from the back. And then that way I've got my spacing. I just have to remember how to spell backwards. The stubble on your legs, and then looks, and then down here I had so. I think I'm actually going to do a little g. I don't know why I did a capital G to start with. So good. Now I've just seen a problem when I'm doing these. I'm actually putting a black border at the end around the edge, so I'm going to redo this. Okay, this is why usually you want to do it as lightly as possible so you can barely see it. I'm doing it a little bit darker so you can see. You see, this is kind of impromptu. I'm doing it as I go along with you, so I can see where I went roughly last time. Try to rub that out as much as you can. And then I'm going to come there we go, a little more to the right. I'd like this tail bigger as well. So good. And then it was said no one ever. If I remember right, the said no one was fairly central, I think. Let's go for it. and then Ever here. Ever. There we go. So I'm quite happy with how that's spaced out now. It looks better than it did before. Looking at that, the only thing I might have to be careful of is this looks. I might actually just bring that down very slightly, a little bit lower. I'll try and get rid of as many of those marks as possible. Okay, now I'm going to bring in my ink. I've got Ecoline inks. It's a water-based watercolour ink. It comes with a dropper. I'm not actually using the dropper. I'm going to pop that onto a wet wipe. I've squeezed everything out of it, but just in case any excess drips off there. And what I'm using is a special pen. Now, this pen is from a company near me. It's called Mitchell Finch. They make them by hand. They made this one to order. They asked me what size I wanted, what sort of colour, what tin this is made out of. If anyone in the UK will notice, this is I think it's a Tate and Lyle maple syrup sort of tin. I can't think what it's called, like a treacle tin, that sort of thing. But there's all sorts of do Coke cans and everything. So so that's Mitchell Finch. I think it was about £10 for this, but they're absolutely brilliant just to have a play with. They're based in Suffolk, so if you put in Mitchell -Finch and then in Suffolk, you should come out with them. So what I'm going to do, if I bring my ink here, you'll be able to see it's the ink watercolour. Just dipping the tip in and brushing any excess off. I now have some ink sitting in, I don't know how well you can see that, but sitting in the slit between the two folds of the metal. What I'm going to do now is very much like any fountain pen. The harder I press down, the thicker the lines I get. And it's a very scratchy way of writing. The great thing is you can get a really nice, what's the word? A very casual, quite a freehand style with this. And as you can see, it's a lot to do with the angle, but also the pressure. So if I want thick lines when I go up, I can absolutely have thick lines when I go up as well. I don't have to have thin lines going upwards. Okay, and this dries, I'm going on watercolour paper. And this dries ever so quickly with this because it's on the watercolour. There we go. On. So I mean, it's up to you which lines you do as thick and thin, but I just have some fun with it. I try not to be too uniform. I try not to worry too much about the thickness of my lines or anything. It's just, it's almost like a graffiti style scratched into a wooden table sort of look, and you'll hear that scratching as you go as well, which some people will love. Some people really won't love. There we go. Now what I'm actually going to do with the brush lettered words, they are going to be done with embossing powder. So I have VersaFine pens. There's a few different brands that do embossing pens, but bear in mind I am using them on watercolour paper, so I have not got my best VersaFine for that. I am using an old pen because the watercolour paper has got texture, and of course the texture will ruin the nib of your pen, and it's evident within 1 or 2 uses. So it's not, don't think you can get away with just doing 1 or 2 projects with your best pen on watercolour paper. It won't happen. It will ruin it very, very quickly. So what I'm going to do is just take any ink out of my pen with a wet wipe. Bear in mind this is very sharp. It is constructed from metal. So what I tend to do is just pop my nail with a baby wipe over the top in through there to clean anything out, and then that's ready to go away again. Now I'm going to blast this with a heat gun very quickly. Normally I'd leave this to dry, but for the video's sake I'm going to blast it with a heat gun. Sorry, I didn't finish talking there. Just blast it, and then that way I can do my heat embossing straight away. There we go, that's probably enough because like I say, it does dry ever so quickly. Now hopefully you can see the sort of scratchy detail that you've got on there. I absolutely love it. I think it's brilliant. Okay, now team that with a nice silver embossing. It's going to look stunning. So I have got one here now. You can see I've named this Old. Let me see how, yeah, that's very old. So now I'm just going to go directly over the letters, pressing down. Now this is in my brush lettering, okay? So I'm doing thick and thin lines. It is hard because you can't see where you're going. So what I'll do is a little bit, one word at a time. So hopefully you can then keep an eye on where you've been and not allow the ink to dry too much. It is an embossing ink, so it shouldn't dry. There we go, just give it a little flick. Got too much excess off there. If you do like I did and flick it too much, put a little bit more on. That ink is still damp. Press it down, making sure you get everything, and then tip it off again. I always tap it to get the excess off, but sometimes I can go a little bit too harsh with it. Now I take a paintbrush, fine paintbrush, and I'm just going to brush off any excess where I don't want it, okay? And it's just going to get rid of. Now once you've got the heat gun on here, that will blow away a lot of this that we're just loosening up. Okay, so just make sure as much as possible is gone. There we go, I'll heat that up. So now, oh, I've just got a bit at the end to do, sorry. So now, there we go, you see the shine, gorgeous. I'm going to do the other words. If while you're doing this you feel actually you could change a word slightly one way or another, something would look a bit better somehow, just do it, just go for it. I think this G, although I'm still going to keep it as a lowercase, I'm going to bring it up a bit more, like so. Okay, now when the end of your tip does start fraying, what you can do is go to the bullet nib, okay, and you can start using that for the thinner parts. Okay, so go over the entire piece in that, particularly the thinner areas. I think this one's actually drying out now. We'll see when we put the powder on whether it's got any ink left in it or not, and then you can use the thicker brush nib to fill in thicker areas as you need. There we go. Let's just put some powder on that first and see. I've got a feeling that thin one maybe wearing, oh no, we've got some powder on there, we're okay. We're okay. Right, so I can go ahead with this. There we go, and just fill in the rest of the words. I think I'm going to make this D a little bit bigger. Don't know why I've got some sort of colour on the end of my embossing pen there, a little bit of grey or blue or something from somewhere, who knows where. Now I'm not worried about bending this paper too much because I have got to put this in a frame. There we go, so again just brushing off the excess, just loosening it up so when I put the heat gun on it comes away. I've missed a bit there, I don't know how I've missed a bit there, but these things happen. So let's just take this pen, add in there, oops. Now to prevent embossing powder sticking where you don't want it, you can also use an anti-static bag, which is often seen for heat embossing and stamping and such. And it's just a little bag filled with some sort of anti-static powder. I'm not actually sure what they put in there, but what it does, just coats your paper, so if there's any oil or grease or anything like that on it, there we go, that will prevent the powder sticking anywhere except where you want it to be. If you notice any of your lines are a little bit thick, what you can also do is use the paintbrush to just tease the edge few particles of powder from them, and just make that a little bit nicer looking, like so. And the same here, because the ink underneath will eventually dry. There we go. Repeat this one. And it always looks so much better once it's melted. Okay, and then I've just got the word ever to do. Now I'm going to go to another embossing pen just to show you the difference. This one is a Sukaniko one, so embossed dual pen too. This one, the only difference is we do have the brush pen on that end, and I've used it a lot. This is another old one I've got. This end is actually a chisel nib, so if you wanted to do thick hard lines, or I suppose they're thin hard lines but with perfectly square edges, you can do it with that one, and that would be embossing ink on there. So again, like I say, this one is it's not quite as old as the others, but it is one I've previously used and frayed on watercolour paper. It's just one of those things, it's all part of the crafting game, I suppose. You have to unfortunately ruin some of your tools to get beautiful projects. Just always keep old ones to the side. There we go, tip off the excess. Put as much back in the pot as possible. You won't ever get everything back in the pot, but if you can save as much as you can, that's what crafters do, isn't it? Now I seem to have lost my paintbrush, of course. It's probably right in front of me, but I can't see it. I've put it down somewhere to try and tap off the excess as much as I can. There's actually not too much on there. Oh, I've found it, look. There's not too much on there. There we go. I'll melt that. There we go. Now, like I say, just to finish off, we've got some spaces, so I'm going to bring in the ink again. There we go. And we can use this, we can use any sort of paintbrush. I'm going to use this just because I did on the other ones and I want them all to look uniform. Just dipping the nib in, I'm just going to flick. Okay, so the great thing is not a lot of ink actually comes out of this at any time. So I do find myself often using this technique or this tool to flick ink on other projects, because when it comes to other watercolours, if I just want a small amount to be flicked, this is the one to use. There we go. I'm happy with that. It's filled in all the spaces. Again, I will clean up this pen before I put it away. I don't want any rusting happening to the tip. Okay. So do this very quickly, otherwise I will put it away and forget. Perfect. Okay, now let me show you that. So the splats need to dry. I'll probably just go over this with the fine end of one of my pens just to touch up the pieces in the word good. Ever's good, but if I just I don't want to tilt it too far because I don't want to drip those splats, but we've got so good like that. So that's how I go from the very, very beginning to a finished piece. Spacing everything out. I would, once this is dry, once all these splats are completely dry, I'll take an eraser and I will go over the letters. If you get your eraser, you can actually go over watercolour. You won't rub away the watercolour, but you can, to an extent, rub out all the pencil around it, and also some of the pencil marks that you may see underneath it as well. I don't know how, it's like magic, but somehow you can get rid of those pencils. It's almost as if the pencil's sitting on top and the colour has actually stained underneath the paper. So I will wait until the splats are all dry before I do that. Rub it out, and then I'll put it in a frame, and this here is what they look like when they're in a frame. Thank you for watching, everyone.